A widow was mocked at the auction by every man in town. The next day, the entire Apache tribe bowed before her, and the men who laughed fell silent as the grave. The desert wind cut across her face like a knife as she stood on the wooden platform, her black dress billowing in the dust. 20 pairs of eyes boring into her, laughter echoing from the saloon porch to the livery stable. The auctioneer's gavel hovered in the air like an executioner's axe. Martha Holloway's fingers trembled on the small leather pouch in her palm, all she had left after burying John. The crowd's mockery hung heavier than the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Behind her stood the Apache warrior, his face carved from stone, his hand on the knife at his waist. No one saw him arrive. No one understood why he stood there, watching. In that frozen moment, with jeers still echoing across the auction yard, Martha had to decide. Would she tuck her tail and flee from their cruelty, preserving what little dignity remained? Or would she stand her ground against an entire town that wanted to see her broken? Most would choose safety over pride in such a moment. What would you choose when faced with the town's contempt and nowhere left to run? But what happened in the next heartbeat would leave a scar on the Arizona territory that would never heal. 3 days earlier, the morning sun had streamed through the cabin's single window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Martha swept the packed earth floor with mechanical precision, the same way she had every morning since John passed. 6 months a widow, and still she made coffee for 2 out of habit. The cabin stood at the edge of town, close enough to hear the church bells on Sunday, far enough to feel the crushing weight of solitude. Her hands, once soft and pale, now roughened by work she never imagined doing. John had been everything: husband, protector, provider. Without him, the ranch was slipping through her fingers like sand. The mirror above the wash basin reflected a woman she barely recognized. Still young at 32, but with new lines etching themselves around her eyes. Her blonde hair, once her pride, now hastily pinned back under a faded bonnet. She hadn't bothered with the ribbons anymore. Who was there to notice? If stories of struggle and unexpected courage speak to you, consider subscribing. You won't want to miss what comes next in tales like these. Martha gathered the last of John's possessions. His father's pocket watch, his wedding band, the silver spurs he'd been so proud of. She wrapped each item carefully in cloth, as if preserving something sacred. The auction notice had come last week. The bank wouldn't wait any longer. Without John's strength to work the land, the mortgage payments had piled up like the winter snow. Today, she would sell everything except the clothes on her back and the wedding ring on her finger. Tomorrow, she would take the stagecoach east, back to her sister in Pennsylvania, back to being Martha Henderson again, the failed widow who couldn't keep her husband's dream alive. As she closed the door to the cabin for what would be the last time, Martha didn't see the figure watching from the ridge. An Apache scout, silent as a shadow, observing her with curious eyes. The auction yard bustled with activity when Martha arrived. Farmers, ranchers, and townsfolk milled about, eyeing the possessions of the Holloway Ranch laid out on display. Tools, furniture, kitchenware, John's saddle. Martha stood to the side, invisible until the auctioneer called her forward. "Now, folks, we've got something special," the auctioneer, Stanley Weber, announced. His voice carried across the yard with practiced authority. "Mrs. Holloway's bringing some personal effects of her late husband's, good quality items from back east." Martha stepped forward, clutching her small bundle. That's when she saw it, the carved wooden box at the edge of the auction table. Her breath caught. Inside was John's old cavalry saber, the one thing she had intended to keep. Someone had taken it from the cabin. "That's not for sale," she said, her voice sounding stronger than she felt. Weber barely glanced at her. "All property was seized for auction, ma'am. Bank's orders." "No, you don't understand. That sword was a gift from General—" "Look here, boys," called out Frank Denton, the saloon owner, cutting her off. "The widow thinks she still has a say. Laughter rippled through the crowd. "Pitiful sight," someone muttered. "Woman trying to run a ranch. Should have remarried quick instead of playing stubborn," another voice added. Martha's cheeks burned. "The sword stays with me," she insisted, reaching for the box. Weber pulled it away. "This'll fetch a good price. Military memorabilia always does." "I'll give you $3 for it," Denton called out. "Might look good on my wall." $4, countered Mason, the blacksmith. "Make a nice conversation piece." Martha stood frozen as they bid on John's most treasured possession, the symbol of his service, his honor, not for its value, but for the sport of watching her crumble. $5, said Denton with a cruel smile. "Final offer." Weber nodded. "Sold to $100. The voice that cut through the auction yard was not Martha's. The crowd parted as a tall Apache warrior stepped forward. He wore buckskin leggings and a cotton shirt, his long black hair tied back with a leather thong. A knife hung at his belt, and his dark eyes surveyed the crowd with quiet intensity. In his hand, he held a small pouch that clinked with the unmistakable sound of gold. If you stood in Martha's shoes right now, with strangers laughing at your misfortune, would you accept help from this unexpected source, or would your pride make you refuse? The silence that fell over the auction yard was absolute. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. The Apache warrior stepped forward, his moccasins making no sound on the packed earth. He placed the pouch on the auction table. $100, he repeated in perfect English, "for the sword, and for everything else the woman has brought." Weber's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The townspeople whispered among themselves, fear and confusion replacing their earlier mockery. No one had ever seen an Apache carry that kind of money, and why would he want a cavalry officer's sword? "Now hold on," Denton protested. "You can't just—" The warrior turned his gaze to the saloon owner, who immediately fell silent. There was no threat in his expression, merely a certainty that brooked no argument. "The items belong to the woman," the warrior said. "You dishonor her grief." Martha stared at the stranger, unable to comprehend what was happening. The warrior met her eyes briefly, then returned his attention to Weber. "Count it," he said, pushing the pouch forward. With trembling fingers, Weber opened the pouch and poured the contents onto the table. Gold coins spilled out, more money than Martha had seen in years. It's all here," Weber stammered. $100 even." The warrior nodded, then gathered Martha's belongings, the box with John's sword, the pocket watch, the spurs, and the few other items she had brought, and handed them to her. "These are yours," he said quietly, "as they should remain." Before Martha could find her voice to thank him, he turned and walked away, the crowd parting before him like water. At the edge of the auction yard, he mounted a painted pony that no one had noticed before and rode away toward the mountains. "What in God's name was that about?" someone muttered. All eyes turned to Martha, suspicion replacing the earlier contempt. In a small frontier town like Copper Creek, any interaction with the Apache was cause for concern. The uneasy peace between settlers and natives was always fragile. Sheriff Tom Riley pushed through the crowd. "Mrs. Holloway," he said, his hand resting on his gun belt, "you want to explain what just happened?" Martha clutched her recovered possessions to her chest. I don't know him. I've never seen him before." "Seems mighty interested in your husband's effects," the sheriff pressed. "John ever have dealings with the Apache?" "No," Martha said. "He was with the cavalry years ago, but—" "That's right," Denton interjected. "Holloway fought against the Apache in '66, so why would one of them pay good money for his sword?" His eyes narrowed. "Unless there's something you ain't telling us, Mrs. Holloway." Martha shook her head. "There's nothing to tell."
"I don't know why he did that. Maybe she's been trading with them," someone suggested. "Selling information." "Or worse," another voice added. Sheriff Riley's expression hardened. I think you better come to my office, Mrs. Holloway. We need to have a talk about your friend. Martha looked around at the circle of hostile faces. These were people she'd known for years, neighbors, fellow churchgoers. Now they looked at her like she was a stranger, a threat. "I've done nothing wrong," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Then you won't mind answering some questions," Riley insisted, taking her by the arm. As the sheriff led her away, Martha caught sight of a figure watching from the shadow of the livery stable. Another Apache, younger than the warrior who had intervened. Their eyes met for a brief moment before he slipped away. Would you defend Martha here if you were in the crowd, or stay silent to protect yourself from the town's growing suspicion? In the sheriff's office, Martha sat straight-backed on a hard wooden chair. The walls seemed to close in around her as Riley paced the floor, his boots striking the boards with ominous regularity. Through the window, she could see townspeople gathering, their faces dark with speculation. "Let's try again," Riley said. "Why would an Apache warrior pay a fortune for your husband's belongings?" "I've told you, Sheriff, I don't know. Mrs. Holloway, this isn't just about you anymore. If there's Apache activity around Copper Creek, the whole town could be at risk." Martha felt a flash of indignation. "He helped me. He didn't threaten anyone." "That's not how Indians operate," Riley countered. "They don't hand out charity to white women without reason." Before Martha could respond, the door opened. Mr. Fenton, the banker, entered, followed by 3 members of the town council. "Sheriff," Fenton said, his voice grave, "we need to discuss the situation." Riley nodded. "Mrs. Holloway." Holloway was just about to explain her connection to the Apache. "There is no connection," Martha insisted. Fenton adjusted his spectacles. "Then perhaps you can explain this." He placed a folded piece of paper on the desk. "It was found among your husband's papers when we cleared the ranch." Martha leaned forward to see a faded sketch, a cavalry unit on horseback, with John at the front. Behind them, a group of Apache women and children huddled together. It was a scene from a raid, she realized. A raid her husband had participated in. "John never spoke of this," she whispered. "Your husband was part of the force that captured Black Rock's family," Fenton said. "Black Rock, one of the most feared Apache war chiefs. The man we just saw might well be connected to him." Martha's mind raced. John had rarely spoken of his time in the cavalry. He'd been haunted by nightmares, yes, but he'd never shared their content. "If Black Rock's people are back," one of the councilmen said, "we could all be in danger." "They might be planning something," another added, "using the widow as a way in." "That's absurd," Martha protested. "I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm taking the stage east." Riley shook his head. "I can't let you do that, Mrs. Holloway. Not until we figure this out." "You're keeping me prisoner?" "I'm keeping you safe," Riley corrected. "And the town, too. You'll stay at the hotel tonight, under guard." As darkness fell over Copper Creek, Martha sat by the window of her hotel room, watching the street below. 2 men stood outside the hotel entrance, her guards, though Riley had called them protection. Across the street, the saloon blazed with light and noise as townspeople gathered to discuss the day's events and fortify their courage with whiskey. The room was small but clean, paid for with a small portion of the gold the warrior had given her. The rest remained in the leather pouch, hidden in her skirt pocket. Her few possessions, including John's sword, sat on the bed. Martha ran her fingers over the carved wooden box. Why had the warrior paid so much to reclaim these items? What connection could they possibly have to John's past? With trembling hands, she opened the box. The cavalry saber gleamed in the lamplight, its brass hilt polished to a shine. John had always kept it immaculate. She slid the blade partially from its scabbard, revealing an inscription near the hilt, words she had never noticed before. "To Lieutenant J. Holloway, honor above all, 1866. As Martha traced the words with her fingertip, a soft sound drew her attention to the window. A pebble struck the glass, then another. She peered down and saw a figure in the shadows, the young Apache she had glimpsed earlier. He gestured urgently for her to come down. Martha hesitated. To trust him meant defying the sheriff and risking the town's wrath. To ignore him might mean losing her only chance to understand what was happening. Decision made, Martha gathered John's sword and her small bag. The hotel had a back staircase used by the maids, if she was quiet enough. The night air was cool against her face as Martha slipped out the rear door of the hotel. The young Apache was waiting, his finger pressed to his lips in a universal gesture for silence. He couldn't have been more than 16, with keen eyes that missed nothing. "Come," he whispered, "not safe here." "Who are you?" Martha asked. "Why did that warrior help me?" "Later," the boy replied. "We go now." And in that silence, with the town's suspicion growing behind her, the land itself seemed to hold its breath. If you were trapped in Martha's position, would you trust this young stranger and flee into the night, or return to the false safety of your guarded room? Martha followed the boy through the darkened streets of Copper Creek, keeping to the shadows.
Her heart pounded in her chest like a war drum. The boy moved with the practiced ease of someone who had navigated hostile territory before, pausing at each corner, listening for pursuit. They reached the edge of town where 2 horses waited, tethered to a scrub oak. The boy mounted one and gestured for Martha to take the other. "I don't even know your name," Martha whispered. "Swift Fox," he replied. "We ride now, questions later." They rode through the night, following trails invisible to Martha's eyes. The desert landscape was transformed under the moonlight, beautiful and alien. After what seemed like hours, they began to ascend into the foothills. Martha's thighs ached from the unaccustomed riding, but she said nothing. Finally, as the eastern sky began to lighten, Swift Fox led her into a hidden canyon. A small encampment came into view, not a full village, but a temporary gathering of perhaps 30 Apache. At their approach, warriors emerged from shelters, hands on weapons. Women gathered children close, all eyes fixed on Martha with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. The warrior from the auction stepped forward. In the growing dawn light, Martha could see him more clearly. A man in his 40s perhaps, with dignity etched into every line of his face. A jagged scar ran from his temple to his jaw, testament to battles fought long ago. "I am Tallhawk," he said. "You are safe here, Martha Holloway." Martha slid from her horse, her legs nearly buckling beneath her. "How do you know my name? Why did you help me?" Tallhawk gestured toward a fire. "Come, eat first, then we will talk." An older woman brought Martha a wooden bowl of stew and a cup of something hot that smelled of herbs. The food revived her, warming her from within. Around her, the camp went about its morning routine, though many still watched her with guarded expressions. When she had finished eating, Tallhawk sat across from her. "Show me the sword," he said. Martha hesitated, then unwrapped the cavalry saber and handed it to him. Tallhawk examined it carefully, his expression unreadable. Finally, he pointed to the inscription. "Do you know what this truly means?" he asked. Martha shook her head. "Your husband was with the Bluecoats when they attacked our winter camp," Tallhawk said. "I was a young warrior then. They came at dawn, like cowards." His voice held no anger, only a deep sadness. "Many died, women, children, elders." Martha felt a chill despite the morning sun. "John never spoke of it." "No," Tallhawk agreed. "Men seldom speak of their shame." He turned the sword, letting sunlight flash along its blade. "But your husband was different. When the others were killing our people, he turned his weapon against his own kind." Martha stared at him in disbelief. "What?" Lieutenant John Holloway stood between his soldiers and our women and children. He fought his own men to protect the defenseless. Tallhawk's eyes held hers. "He saved my sister and her infant son that day. He saved many." Martha's hand went to her mouth. "That can't be. He would have been court-martialed, executed for treason." Tallhawk nodded. "His commander, a man with honor, protected him." They called it a tactical disagreement in their reports. Your husband was discharged quietly, but among my people, he became a legend. Why didn't he ever tell me? Some burdens are too heavy to share, even with those we love most. Tall Hawk returned the sword to her. For 10 years, I have watched over your ranch from a distance, repaying the debt I owe. When I learned of your husband's passing, I continued to watch. Yesterday, I saw how they treated you. Tears filled Martha's eyes. You bought his sword to honor him. I bought it to return it to the one who deserves to carry his legacy. Tall Hawk's expression softened. But there is more. The man who leads those who mock you, the one called Denton, he was there that day. He was a corporal. He fired on our children until your husband stopped him. Martha's tears dried as understanding dawned. That's why he hates me, why he pushed the bank to foreclose. Yes, and now he spreads lies about you in the town. By dawn, they will be searching. A young warrior approached and spoke urgently to Tall Hawk in Apache. The older man's expression grew grave. Riders are coming, he told Martha. Many of them. The camp erupted into activity. Warriors gathered weapons. Women packed essential belongings. Children were herded toward the back of the canyon where a narrow trail led higher into the mountains. They followed your trail, Tall Hawk explained. The sheriff, Denton, and 20 others. This is my fault, Martha said. I've brought danger to your people. No, Tall Hawk replied firmly. The danger has always been there, in the hearts of men like Denton. He gestured to Swift Fox. Go with the others into the mountains. Martha shook her head. I won't run any more. This has to end. She picked up John's sword. I'll face them. They will not listen to a woman, Tall Hawk warned. Especially not with Denton poisoning their minds. Then I need proof. Martha met his gaze steadily. Is there anyone else who saw what John did that day? Anyone who could confirm your story? Tall Hawk considered for a moment, then nodded slowly. There is one. The commander who protected your husband. He turned to one of his warriors and spoke rapidly in Apache. The man disappeared into a shelter and returned with an elderly Apache woman. She approached Martha with dignity, her face deeply lined by years of sun and sorrow. This is Morning Star, Tall Hawk said. My sister. She was there. She saw everything. Morning Star took Martha's hands in her own. Your husband stood alone against many, she said in halting English. He saved my son who now leads our people. Martha's eyes widened in realization. Blackrock. He's your son? Morningstar nodded. He was just a baby then. Now he is a great chief, and he comes. Black Rock is coming here? Martha asked, alarm rising in her voice. He comes to honor the widow of the man who saved him, Tall Hawk explained. The entire tribe will acknowledge the debt they owe. The sound of approaching horses echoed through the canyon. Martha looked from Tall Hawk to Morningstar, then down at the sword in her hands. In that moment, she understood what John had done, and what she must do now. I need to face them, she said, but I need you with me. Tall Hawk nodded. We will stand together. At the mouth of the canyon, Martha waited with Tall Hawk and 6 warriors. Behind them, the camp had vanished, women, children, and most possessions spirited away into the higher reaches of the mountains. Only a few empty shelters remained as evidence that anyone had been there at all. The riders appeared, Sheriff Riley in the lead with Denton close behind. They reined in their horses at the sight of Martha standing with the Apache. Mrs. Holloway, Riley called out, his hand on his pistol. Step away from them. We've come to bring you home. This woman is under our protection, Tall Hawk responded. She stays by her own choice. Denton pushed his horse forward. See, Sheriff, I told you she was in league with them. Probably has been all along. Martha stepped forward, John's sword in her hand. I know the truth, Frank Denton, about what happened in '66, about what my husband did, and what you did. Denton's face darkened. You don't know anything, woman. I know John stopped you from murdering innocent children, Martha said, her voice carrying to all the riders. What's she talking about, Frank? He asked. Lies, Denton spat. Holloway was a traitor who turned on his own. He should have been shot. He was a hero, Martha countered. And you've been consumed by hatred ever since, haven't you? You couldn't stand to see us happy, to see him respected. So you waited until he was gone, then took everything from me. The tension in the canyon was palpable. Hands hovered near weapons on both sides. One wrong move, one hasty word, and blood would stain the ground. Kindness cost my husband everything, Martha said, addressing the entire posse. But cruelty would have already killed his soul. Which path will you choose today? Before anyone could respond, the sound of many horses approached from the north. All eyes turned to see a large party of Apache warriors crest the ridge above the canyon. At their head rode a commanding figure in full ceremonial dress, a war chief in his prime. Black Rock had arrived. The posse from Copper Creek froze in place, unoutnumbered and suddenly afraid. Black Rock dismounted and walked toward Martha, his gaze never leaving her face. The entire canyon held its breath. When he reached her, Black Rock did something that stunned everyone present. He knelt before Martha, bowing his head. "Wife of John Holloway," he said in clear English, "I honor the man who gave me life. His courage flows in my memory like a river that never runs dry." One by one, the warriors behind him dismounted and knelt as well. Morningstar stepped forward and placed her hands on her son's shoulders, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "This is the child your husband saved," she told Martha. "Now he leads our people with wisdom and strength." The men from Copper Creek watched in astonishment as the entire Apache tribe bowed before the widow they had mocked only a day before. Sheriff Riley removed his hat slowly. "Frank," he said quietly, "I think you better start explaining what really happened back in '66. Denton's face was ashen, his bravado gone. The truth he had buried for so long was finally unearthed for all to see. Martha stood tall, John's sword gleaming in the morning sun. In that moment, she wasn't just a widow struggling to survive. She was the keeper of her husband's legacy, a legacy of courage that had changed lives across two very different worlds. "My husband chose compassion when others chose hate," she said, her voice strong and clear. "I will honor that choice for the rest of my days." Black Rock rose to his feet and extended his hand. "The debt we owe can never be fully repaid, but today we begin." As Martha clasped his hand, a new chapter began, not just for her, but for Copper Creek and the Apache alike. A chapter built on truth, respect, and the courage of one man who dared to stand alone against the tide of hatred. Years later, travelers passing through the Arizona Territory would speak of a strange sight, a prosperous trading post at the edge of Apache lands, run by a blonde woman who spoke the native language with surprising fluency. They said she lived under the personal protection of Black Rock himself, and that both settlers and Apache came to her for counsel. They said she kept a cavalry sword mounted above her door, not as a weapon, but as a reminder that one person's courage could create ripples that changed the course of many lives. Would you have risked everything, as John Holloway did, for people you were taught to fear? Would you have found the strength, as Martha did, to carry that legacy forward? Subscribe for more powerful stories of courage and redemption like this, and click on the video on the screen to watch our next frontier tale with a twist so profound it will stay with you long after the screen goes dark.